Good afternoon, everybody. It's David Schlott-Howard here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Sunday, July 27th, 2025. In today's tropical weather update, I am going to give you the very latest detailed information on a very strong tropical wave that is coming off of Africa by late tonight into the day tomorrow. The big question really remains is, will this become a tropical depression or tropical storm in the MDR on approach to the greater and lesser Antilles? Or could this end up threatening parts of the Bahamas, including for Florida or somewhere in the Gulf Coast? In this tropical weather update, I am going to be breaking down all those details. If you haven't been here before and you're new and you absolutely like these detailed tropical weather outlook and discussions, you find these helpful, detailed, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell notification icon to get all of my tropical weather updates on a daily basis, hit that like button, and share this video with your family and friends on social media. So taking a look at our latest GOES 19 True Color Visible Satellite imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There's a link in the description below this video, and as we take a detailed look at the imagery very closely, we can clearly see where there is quite a bit of dry, stable air across the Atlantic when we look at it here with the stratocumulus clouds indicating that the air is sinking, it is warm, and it is really dry, not supporting any convection whatsoever. However, there is some convection going on across the Caribbean right now, part of a very weak tropical wave, but that's nothing compared to with what is going to be coming off of Africa, as we see here on the True Color imagery, showing a lot of explosive deep convection that is getting ready to move off of Africa. And that is that very strong tropical wave that everybody is concerned about, including myself here in today's video. Here's an extended version of that, looking at the entire northern portion of Africa this afternoon. You can see as the sun comes out, there is red colors indicating that temperatures there are very hot. But down here to the south, we have a big cluster of explosive thunderstorm activity, part of a strong tropical wave that is getting ready to move off of Africa this afternoon and evening. Actually, it's evening over there, but by early tomorrow morning, we'll see this emerge, and we will see if models better correct and realize that this actually exists, because if they don't correct, then we might have a very weak tropical wave to contend with than what models were previously showing yesterday and the day before. So with that all being said, let's take a look now at our 5 global computer models, because this is pretty important in terms of how I make my videos, and you all really like that when I go into very thorough detail on what we're dealing with here between all of our reliable global computer models. So the first model we're going to look at in today's video is the European model. Then we're going to be focusing on the AI model, which stands for artificial intelligence. Then the Canadian model, the CMC GEM, however you want to call it. Then the German model, which is the ICON, and then the American GFS model. And then we'll be looking at our environmental condition forecast, because everybody's curious, will this actually become a tropical depression or tropical storm, if not even a hurricane? So with that being said, here's a look at the latest forecast from the Euro for this afternoon. And as you can see, not much out there right now going on our surface wind plot. But let's go forward here, because the system does try to develop, especially once we go further out in time. Not really on the European model. As you can see here, it continues to indicate that this is very broad. This is not even going to exist at all, just like the GFS model. But there are still some other models that are picking up on this wave, and it still indicates it's going to survive, and it's going to try developing in the lesser Antilles, especially in near, basically if you are in Antigua, as well as if you are on the U.S. British Virgin Islands, if you are in Anguilla, including for Puerto Rico, there's still a slim possibility that this could still make a run for tropical depression territory. But is not very likely given what our models are showing. So when we put this into motion here and look at the Caribbean, there is our wave pocket that shows up here. I mean, barely anything at all. There's barely winds of 20 miles per hour. In fact, if we actually go to our wind miles per hour, there is winds of about 20 to 25, but that's the extent of it. And this really doesn't develop at all over the next 10 days. So when it gets to the islands here, we're looking at about a little over 5 days. which the National Hurricane Center has not highlighted anything out for this area, which means there is so low confidence that this is actually going to exist. But maybe later down the road, maybe along the mid-Atlantic coast or in the Gulf, we could still see development, and I'll show you some other models that are showing that. So that's a look at the European model over the next 5 to 7 days at showing the chances of tropical development. But let's take a look now at the AI model, the artificial intelligence European model, which is really good. And this is one of those newer models that was introduced nearly a couple of years ago, and it has a good, somewhat of a minute track record. We're still learning more about it to see if it's actually going to accurately predict this tropical wave that is coming off of Africa. So this is where we're at now. This is for Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, and you can see our wave is not developing until we get into Monday night into Tuesday. This would be the last day of July where we have a tropical wave here dubbed in yellow. That's the vorticity plot at 850 millibars, showing us how much spin there is at that level. Got a nice good ridge of high pressure here to the north, helping to steer things generally towards the west at a pretty marked rate, and that's because of the gradient between this high to the north and this trough of tropical weather to the south. So as we go forward in time, the system does struggle. We see that in all model runs today, that the system is probably not going to thrive very well on approach to the lesser and greater Antilles over that 5 to 6 day period, which is good news for a lot of you that are watching this, that maybe after all, we are not going to see a tropical depression or tropical storm impacting these islands. But that does not mean other people are out of the woods. And the reason why we say that is because there is some speculation that the AI may be onto something. And I'll show you that here. Okay, so that's day 6, and this is day 7, and you can still see an area of vorticity spin in the atmosphere trying to get going here on the 3rd day of August. This would be for Sunday. A week from today, we would be tracking an area of disturbed weather. But where does that area of disturbed weather actually go? There have been a lot of differences amongst the models here on the artificial intelligence. If we look back at a few runs, there's been something here for a while now. It's been over here, and so most recently we have had a consistent signal here from the European artificial intelligence that a tropical depression would exist here near the Bahamas and near Florida, and not necessarily a tropical storm given how broad it actually is. But now there are a lot of people going a little over the top on this, and I'm going to caution you all. Anything beyond 10 days out, folks, see my 10 fingers? 10 fingers. Anything beyond 10 days is very skeptical. It is very uncertain. It's usually fantasy land. It's deja vu land, if you want to think about it. I would not trust anything beyond the 10-day forecast, because I'm going to go beyond 10 days and I'm going to show you potentially the worst case scenario that could end up happening here. But it does not mean it will. Okay, don't freak out, all right? This is just a forecast model, and it's only one model only, okay? Amongst the Euro that didn't show anything in 10 days versus the artificial intelligence giving us a clue that, oh, we may have to watch this beyond the Caribbean, perhaps, or beyond the Dominican Republic, or even perhaps, say, Puerto Rico. Because as you know, they may not develop out here in the Caribbean or the Western Main Development Region, but maybe they develop over here closer to where we live as humans, right? So that's why we need to watch these things, watch model runs every day. But again, beyond 10 days, please use this with great caution, especially on a model that's been around for only 2 years, which is the artificial intelligence model. So where does this go? So it heads towards Miami, Florida, okay, as a tropical depression here with winds of about 35 miles an hour. This is just beyond the day 10 time frame. And then look what happens. Once it gets into the Gulf, it strengthens further. But this is 312 hours out. So we're looking at the 9th of August. Today is only the 27th of August. So we have literally about 2 weeks. So this is 2 weeks out, exactly 336 hours. This is a 2-week mark. And I'll tell you what, a lot of uncertainty. When we look at prior runs, this is where it was in the previous run on the 06Z run. This is where it was there, and it's just moving all around. We do not have consistency, okay? But there's been a lot of talk all over X, which is formerly known as Twitter. People have been tweeting about this. I've seen it on Facebook, Instagram, that, oh, we have a major hurricane going to hit Louisiana. Please, people, I would refrain from posting things like this because you're only using it to get attention, to cause a lot of panic when it doesn't need to be used, because this is 336 hours out. At the end of the day, August the 10th. So something to use this with great caution is that it's going to show something big because it's very far out. It's called fantasy storms. It's called fantasy land, something that is more than 10 days out. Here's some good news. Some light that I could shine on all of you is that the Canadian model is not aggressive either with this. Let's go back. Maybe a low end tropical depression with winds of 30 miles an hour at the very most in about 6 to 7 days. That would be a week from today. We could be looking at that disturbance moving across the Lesser Antilles and Greater Antilles as well. Okay. And then moving this forward, let's there we go. So 10 days out, we have a system approaching the central portion there of the Bahamas, like Grand Bahama down there, getting some disturbing weather in about 10 days. Versus the artificial intelligence model, if we go back and look at that, it has a system a little to the north than what the Canadian model is. But it is important that these two models are neck and neck on each other, showing something that exists here in about 10 days. What about the Icon model? Everyone's wondering about, what about the Icon, David, and the German model? So let's put that into motion. It shows the disturbance here, so pretty much away from the islands, mostly in about 7 days. And this only goes out to 180 hours out, so we don't get the full 10-day forecast, but there is definitely a disturbance that does exist here by the 3rd of August. We look at the Canadian model in similarity. It has the system there. The artificial intelligence model has the system almost in the similar spot, not quite close, but very, very much similar to with what these three models show: the artificial intelligence, the Canadian, and the Icon. All right, so that's a thing to keep in mind. And then lastly, let's take a look here at the GFS model, the American model, because that's the one that can give us fantasy storms. But surprisingly, the GFS has been a bit conservative recently. So let's put this into motion and see what the GFS actually shows. And you can see right down here, some a weather disturbance moves across the Lesser and Greater Antilles, bringing some rain, some wind, some thunderstorms. But look at nothing. There's just nothing out there looking out to 10 days. Completely different from our three models here that show a disturbance just north of Puerto Rico. That makes sense. However, it is sniffing out more tropical formation along that decaying cold front off the mid-Atlantic coast in about 10 days, which is probably not going to happen given it's only one model run that is showing that. If we look at prior runs, look at just completely different. So I'm not going to rely too much on the GFS right now since it's our outlier, given that the Euro and all the other models are showing at least a weak disturbance approaching the Caribbean, the Greater and Lesser Antilles in about 6 to 7 days. So now, what about the environmental forecast with this? So a lot of questions you're probably going to ask me this question in today's video, that why is this system not going to develop? Like, what's going to prevent something to develop into a tropical storm or hurricane? Well, there's a lot going on here. First of all, we have a lot of this dry air that is coming and descending out of higher latitudes. So it's coming down this way. This is very dry, this is warm, and it's stable. You cannot get tropical formation when you get all these brown colors, indicating that there's a lot of deep layer dry air in place. All right, and all that moisture is going to be scuffled down here that's piled up where you're trying to get this drier air that's going to try to wrap all the way around. This was not seen in previous model runs, quite surprisingly. And let's see if we get our, no, we don't have our latest Euro out yet, so we'll use the GFS in this case. But you can see that the GFS model does not develop the system just because there is actually quite a bit of drier air wrapping in around the system. There is now looks to be some westerly vertical wind shear that the system is going to encounter. So that is why there is a sure bet that this is not going to explode in intensity like we saw with Beryl. Okay, that's the good news here. This is not in no hurry because of the negative factors. Lots of dry air, some vertical wind shear that is in place. Also, if we look at the mid-levels of the atmosphere at 700 millibars, let's go and look at the Central Atlantic. We have a very, very powerful jet, okay, easterly African jet at 10,000 feet, which is 700 millibars. You got a nice, good, strong retrograding Rossby wave, anticyclonic wave breaking event that's going to be moving off of Africa in tandem with this wave too as it moves off of Africa. Between these two, you get very strong enhanced easterly flow behind it, to the north, and in front of it, and that's going to enhance your deep layer vertical wind shear out of the westerly direction. I know it doesn't seem very obvious that there's going to be westerly shear when you have a lot of easterly flow here, but you got to understand this wave is going to be moving very fast at least 20 to almost 30 miles per hour. When you have a tropical wave moving that fast, for one thing, it can develop very easily just because you need slower moving systems, lighter background wind flow from the easterly direction to kickstart that process. And secondly, when you get a fast moving wave like this, you actually get relative shear that's not usually detected on many on current analysis. So in other words, if the system here is moving, say, at 30 miles an hour and mid and upper level winds are out of the same direction, but at, say, 5 to 10 miles per hour, well, that's going to be a net flow of 15 to 20 knots of vertical wind shear out of the westerly direction. And what I mean by that is if we take an average sounding over here, let's go to full screen. I know this is very hard to see, but take note here how we have really light winds in this part of the atmosphere, but really strong winds here. So essentially, when you take the net flow here, you actually get a westerly wind shear when you have stronger winds lower down in the atmosphere, weaker winds aloft, versus vice versa. So with that all being said, I sure hope I did bring some clarity in today's video on understanding what is going to possibly prevent this from really strengthening very quickly is because of what I just discussed about the vertical wind shear. That's going to be a little bit on the neutral side, along to go with some drier air that is now getting involved with this system as this moves generally off towards the west-northwest off of Africa. So looking at the European ensemble forecast, looking at 51 different members here, but not all 51 are shown here with this disturbance. That's because, well, not all members think that this is going to develop. And so therefore we have a much more muted signal in today's update from the 12D European ensemble forecast, meaning that the chances of development now are a bit more uncertain and more in question whether or not we will actually get a tropical depression out here just to the north of the greater and lesser Antilles, such as Puerto Rico, as well as Dominican Republic, Guadeloupe, as well as Antigua, as well as some of the British U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as Anguilla. So we got to keep that in mind here, that there is a lot of uncertainty. And right now, I'm a bit more finicky if we're even going to see a tropical depression or tropical storm with this. If we go without seeing a named storm, this would be one of the slowest starts to the Atlantic hurricane season, but doesn't always mean it's going to stay that way. We'll probably see a very backloaded season. More on that in just a second. The GEFS ensemble, very little to no signal out here at all right now. So there is quite a bit of uncertainty and there's no consistency between each ensemble models at this time. So now the big important question in all of this is, when will the Atlantic start waking up with tropical activity? I know we have a tropical wave coming off of Africa, but that seems to be now more in question than what we first thought, because of the convective coupled Kelvin wave might actually end up taking a little longer than what we first thought, and it ends up now becoming more part of the MJO, which doesn't arrive until about the second week of August. So with that being said, here's a look at the European Ensemble Control Velocity Potential Anomaly. The further down you go in is later in time. So this goes all the way out until the second week of August, which is the 11th here. And what we have right now is an area of sinking motion that dominates Africa. And that is why we are not in a good predicament here for any tropical development as what we first thought. This seems to be delaying up a little bit more. And that is why our wave coming off of Africa is going to have some hurdles with it now than what we first thought. And it might end up developing as it gets into the Gulf or into the mid-Atlantic, wherever that wave ends up going once it gets past the Caribbean. But long story short is, once we go into the past the first week of August, about the 7th, I would say, of August and beyond is the best window of opportunity here, when Africa, the Indian Ocean, will be very optimal for a lot of tropical development. Lots of strong tropical waves coming off of Africa, potentially some that could acquire enough rotation, enough robust convection for the potential for a tropical depression or storm likely to develop out here in the MDR if things go as planned, as what the MJO forecast calls for, the Hofmolar diagram, that is, before more sinking motion takes place by the middle to the end of August. So we're going to have another interesting August here like we had over the last couple. So looking at the extended range forecasts beyond the 11th of August, which is right here on the map, we're looking at more additional possibilities here of rising motion over the Indian Ocean and over the maritime continent. But it's going to be battleground by more dry sinking air over Africa, which might make things a little bit more decimated for any tropical development. But we'll see. We'll see how this progresses in later updates. But it looks like right now, by early September, things could click into place for a very, very busy peak hurricane season. It looks like right around the 10th through the 15th of September. Early on in the forecast here, we're looking at possibly an estimation of that occurring. After we look at the Hofmolar diagram, now let's take a look at the RMM MJO phase diagram. Right now, the MJO is in phase 7. It has not de-amplified as what models previously thought, which is important going forward. Does this remain amplified enough to where it smoothly moves into phases 1 and 2? Typically, for the Atlantic to get quite busy, we need the MJO to be in phases 2. So phases 2, phase 3, and phase 4. So right in this window is where we typically look for the Atlantic to see heightened tropical activity in the MDR, perhaps even in the Gulf as well as in the Caribbean. And right now, it looks like that will be the case. As we go into the end of the first week of August, into the second week, we look to have a very weak low frequency signal of the MJO into phase 1, 2, and 3 between the 5th and the 10th of August. So with that being said, here's a look at the latest NOAA Coral Reef Watch daily sea surface temperature anomaly map. And as we discussed nearly a week ago when we last looked at this, we have a lot of below average or relatively below average sea surface temperatures compared to the surrounding tropics down here in the southeastern Pacific, along to go with the eastern Pacific off the California coast, where we have a warm anomaly there to the north of Hawaii. But as a whole, the Atlantic is relatively warmer than this basin over here in the eastern Pacific. But there's a caveat to this. Number one, the subtropics are really warm. We're getting rid of this warm patch of water that we had nearly a week ago. And secondly, our Atlantic Nina has not gone away and has in fact intensified even further, which is going to put a huge wrinkle and possibly could dwarf the season a little bit, or smorf it, in other words, meaning that the NHC is predicting 13 to 19 named storms right now, but we may end up seeing 9 to 14 named storms. And that's what my forecast is as of now, and that's based on early July. I will update you all on that once we get into August on what my thoughts are based on this and what is going on up here in the deep tropics. But anyways, if you haven't been here before and you did find today's tropical weather outlook and discussion very detailed, helpful, informative, and life-saving, folks, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, as it really helps out a lot. All right, we are very close to 50,000 subscribers. And also, I do live streams when it comes to Atlantic hurricane landfalls. Okay, so if we are dealing with a hurricane somewhere in the United States and it has 24 hours left before landfall, or even 36 hours, depending on the situation, I will be live streaming for 36 straight hours before a landfalling tropical storm or hurricane near you. So again, if you have not subscribed yet, and if this is your first time watching these tropical videos that I have released for a while now, please don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and also leave a comment in the section below this video. It really means a lot, folks. It really does. And I will be back with you more tomorrow with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion.